Welcome everyone to our next installment, our next session on our 31-day journey over the topic of prayer. Over the bulk of the first week of the endeavor, we wrestled with aspects to challenge our entire paradigm on what prayer is. A lot of people view prayer as a list of petitions that they just ask God to do. But we really wrestled with thought, the ideal that prayer is more than that. Prayer is communion between us and God. It is received by God, valued by God, and cherished by God. Then over the last 2 days, we have looked at some of Jesus' specific teachings on the topic of prayer, and additionally we took time to look at Jesus' own prayer life. I would note on those two aspects alone, we could have done an entire series just on those two aspects. We could have done an entire series just on Jesus' teachings on prayer, and we could have done an entire series just on Jesus' own personal prayer life. Those topics run deeper than how far we dug, and eventually we may come back to those topics on their own, but we are going to continue to plow forward. Over the probably the remainder of this week, we are going to look at things that Scripture says specifically on the topic of prayer that I think are things that we should take note of and consider and weigh and live out in our daily life. The first one of these elements that we are going to be looking at, it is found from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 17. The scripture makes an incredibly simple statement, but one that I think should shape our prayer lives. I think it should shape our prayer lives, and I think it should challenge us. And I think when we look at this scripture like a mirror, and we wrestle with the question, what does this say about me? We wrestle with, am I living this out? Am I practicing this? Am I doing this? I think if we ask that question and we look at ourselves honestly, we see a very clear truth. That truth is there's more, and we can press deeper, and God is calling us to deeper. We look at topics like prayer, and a lot of people just view it as basic and goes in one ear and out the other, and they remain unstretched by the conversation with the mentality of, I know that, I'm good, I don't have anything to worry about, I'm fine. And that mentality raises so many questions. The truth of the matter, when we are walking with God, there is a continual refinement. A lot of people are unwilling to be refined because they have everything together. If you're unwilling to be refined, then it's not the fire of the refiner that you're standing in. You're standing in something else. But the verse that we have been alluding to, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 17, the scripture simply says to pray without ceasing. Do you pray without ceasing? Do I pray without ceasing? No. Well, how do you pray without ceasing? How do you do that? One, I think it's a discipline that you consciously take steps towards, a discipline that you constantly evaluate, a discipline that you constantly allow yourself to be refined and molded and shaped and you're constantly stepping forward. You're constantly looking in the mirror, engaging yourself, and bringing yourself into alignment. I don't think praying without ceasing is being on your knees without ceasing. I think it's a mindset. I think it is setting your thoughts and your mind on heavenly things. It is keeping your heart and your mind in a constant state of communion with God, a constant state of meditation on the things of God, a constant state where you are aware that God is present, God is speaking, and God is with you, and God is not far. Praying without ceasing, it is an awareness that you are doing life with God. Praying without ceasing is constantly having the door of your heart open and allowing Christ to come in and sit at the table and commune with you and you with him. It is a constant state of fellowship with God. Praying without ceasing is a mindset. Praying without ceasing, it is a lifestyle. It is a way of life. Praying without ceasing, you're either striving to do it or it is the opposite of you. Praying without ceasing is not something that you do by accident. It is a choice. It is a discipline. And now, praying without ceasing, it is also something that the religious would downplay. Praying without ceasing is something that the religious would make you think that you're fine if you don't do it. It's not a big deal. Consider this. Jesus taught that if you pray for public show, you pray openly so all can see you. In that, you have had your reward. And he taught that we should pray in private. And we should close the door on our prayer life, and it should be something personal between you and God. And what you do secretly, what you do in secret, God will reward openly before all to see. The religious would downplay praying without ceasing and basically say it doesn't matter, you're fine. But I think it is so true to what Jesus taught us about praying in private, about praying in secret, about it just being between us and God. And we look at Jesus' prayer life over and over and over and over. He broke away from the crowd and he got alone with the Father. Praying without ceasing is bringing your mind into submission. It is bringing your mind and your heart into submission with the prayer life that Jesus himself modeled. It is a mindset. You know, the scripture says in 2 Corinthians 10:4-5, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. Those words pulling down in the Greek, it basically denotes completely destroying. Right? So we plug that understanding into that verse. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the complete destruction of our strongholds. And then catch verse 5, right? It says, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. We see this scripture, and it is all about our mindsets, right? Like, it is about us casting down things in our mind, imaginations in our mind that are contrary to God, and us casting down things that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and us literally bringing our own mind into captivity to the obedience of Christ. It is a mindset, and it is something that we do. It is a choice that we make. It is a discipline that we live out in our own daily life. And kind of further into this train of thought, Romans 12:2, be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And then also there's Philippians 4:8. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of a good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Praying without ceasing, it is a constant state of meditation on God. It is a constant state of bringing your mind and your heart in communion with God. It is a constant state of meditation on the will of God and wrestling with what the will of God is. Praying without ceasing is bringing your mind into the place where it is thinking on things that are true, on things that are honest, on things that are just, pure, lovely, things that are of a good report, if there be virtue in it, and if there be praise in it. Praying without ceasing, this constant state of communion with God, and casting down thoughts that look like anything contrary to these things. It is a discipline that we choose to model in our own life. There are people that sit back with the mentality of, I'm going to ask God to do a thing, and then they sit back and they wait while their minds are completely enslaved to a thought process that is radically against the ways of God. God is not looking for people whose minds are radically against his ways. God is looking for people whose minds and hearts are set on him, who desire to dwell with him, to be with him. Prayer is communion with God. Prayer is being with God. Prayer is setting your mind and your heart on him.